I'm gonna put it right here.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah. We're gonna present sitting here just because we've got a live audience here. So we're gonna present from here so that they can see on the Zoom camera, which is why I kind of sat down. But welcome to Just Be Kitchen. I want to say this is our second event. Our second wellness event. Our third event. We had some live music out here since COVID started, so it's really nice to be able to do these in person again and get some hope coming around. I've been waiting for this event for a long time because when Amber, who's my event guru, we start to brainstorm events, it usually comes from personal experience from her or I or someone on our team kind of comes forward and says, hey, we should really be looking at this area. And for me personally, I've been working with two of these practitioners on my own sort of manifestation of trauma that I believe that's been stored in my body and some of those symptoms. So this is a deeply personal event for me specifically. I think you're going to get a lot of value from these three presenters. These are alternative methods of healing, alternative modalities, and they're all experts in these individual areas. For those of you who aren't aware of or haven't been to one of our wellness events, we have a whole calendar of wellness events, and we basically focus on anything that we believe is kind of trending in the wellness space. If you guys have burning issues or burning things that you want to learn about, please let us know. That does get communicated within our team. We brainstorm the ideas, we talk about it. But we're always trying to bring something that isn't necessarily fully mainstream, but is a great opportunity to learn and digest. These are really interactive sessions. So each, Carol, Missy, and Mark are going to talk for 10 to 15 minutes about their own respective areas. And then please ask questions. It's also okay. They're very comfortable speaking and whatnot. So feel free to interject in their individual presentations too, to ask clarifying questions. We do have a set of attendees on Zoom, so they might chime in with a question, and we just want to honor that as well. I'll repeat the question if it might be a little bit difficult to hear. But yeah, so thank you guys so much. I think Dr. Missy is going to go first. Dr. Missy is with a company her company is called Stay Invincible. I've been seeing her personally I've known her for like 5 years, and I had been recommended to go see her about a gazillion times and was like, no, I'll just keep going on. And then finally my functional MD, Dr. Sayana, was like, you really should go see Dr. Missy for visceral organ mobility, which she's going to talk about. Hello? And so I've been going, and I will say from personal experience, after my first session, I started to feel...
You're on mute. You're on mute. You're on mute.
Heard. Let's see. I'm so sorry. I just did a spiel. Welcoming you all, welcoming everyone.
Talked about the meaning of life.
Solve the world, I'm so sorry, you guys. I thought we had tested that earlier. Anyways, I was just introducing Dr. Missy. She does visceral organ mobility. She was recommended to me for years, and I sort of didn't take the call, and then my functional MD recommended her to me again, and so I decided to go see her, and after one session I started to feel some shifts, and it's just really powerful what she does. Carol from Rebel Healing, she'll talk to you about some neurofeedback, which I also do regularly, and I won't go into too much detail. I'll let them go ahead and explain. And then we've got Dr. Mark here as well, from the Vitality Center, and he's going to talk about
Stuff.
really
Body,
cool
mind, stuff.
really cool body mind stuff. So anyways, I don't want to, I'm sorry that you guys missed the beginning of that, but I promise you it wasn't very interesting. No? Okay. Dr. Missy, come on down.
Thanks, man.
All right, so my name is Missy. I'll give you this guy.
Just one right there.
So my company's name is Invincible. I work inside Denver Sports Recovery and Nurture, which is all within a 1 mile radius over here. And I'm a doctor of physical therapy by trade, but I specialize in visceral manipulation, which is what we're kind of here to talk about today in regards to trauma. And so as we are all sitting here right now, your organs are moving, especially if you're eating. They are moving. An organ in good health has to have good motion. And I know as I grew up, I always thought of like organ health as, digestion, hormone, doctor. Like if something was wrong with my organs, I had to go to the medical doctor and get medication or surgery. And so this is opening your minds to realizing that your organs have to move as you're sitting here. They also have to move as you're standing and walking and squatting and doing all of that stuff. And so what got me into this work was in, it was 2008. I was in PT school and I was having really bad lower back pain that nobody could figure out. And one of my professors on staff specialized in visceral manipulation. And I remember he adjusted my back, he did all this stuff, and it made it worse. And then he finally worked on my intestines and got rid of my back pain, which is it's just a mind-blowing concept, and especially as a PT student. So I just knew that as I got further along in my practice that I was going to dive into studying that, because I truly believe it's an area of the body that is missed when we look at optimal function, performance, athletic performance, healing from an injury, that kind of stuff. So when I look at my own story, I was a C-section baby, so I probably started with some digestive upset as a babe, was colicky, played soccer, so was hit on the head many, many times, lots of falls, body contact, just like trauma that way. I hit my head on a door, and just the emotional stress of life. So who here has hit their head on something? Okay, so when you hit your head, there is this stored energy that is landing into your body, and your body may process some of it. You may get an injury, you may have to have surgery, something like that. But there's a part of your body that adapts to that trauma, and you hold it in your system. So you have that one trauma where you've been hit on your head, and then who's fallen on their tailbone? Yes. So then we have a trauma down here. So life starts to add these layers of tension. And if you look at that handout that I shared, you can kind of see the skeleton that is relatively organized, and then the skeleton that is a little bit disorganized. So when we think of hitting our head and hitting our tailbone, you think maybe a scratch, a wound on the skin, a trauma to the bone. Maybe the nerve is injured, maybe the muscle is injured, but deep to that are our organs. And so the organs actually go through, depending on the area that's hit, they can go through a whiplash, they can bounce around in the body, a ligament that is holding the organ in place can get shocked and stretched and hold this line of tension. And so what this does over years is, and maybe a little bit of Jen's story is, your body isn't necessarily gonna feel the disruption right away. You might recover from that fall really quickly, but it's as we stack these layers over time, your body's gonna finally cry out, hey, I need some help. And a lot of the patients that I see they've seen a ton of providers, they've gotten to a certain level and then just kind of plateaued. And so a lot of times, which is amazing, because then we just get their organs moving and their bodies respond really well. So visceral manipulation, I put the definition on there just because it sounds like I'm going to take your liver and crack it and move it somewhere else. But it's a very gentle, gentle hands-on work. Very gentle, right? Like half of the time people, you can't even necessarily realize that I'm working on you, but then you start to feel the shift in your body. And it's really cool work because it takes a lot of specificity in my hands and in people's hands who've done this training to feel what structure you're on. So that's the difference between, oh, I'm just like generally rubbing my belly. My hand during a session feels the top of your head, and what I'm feeling for is a line of tension in the body. That's where your body is directing me what needs to work on, and then as you lay down, I can get more specific. Is it the liver? Is it the liver and the sigmoid? Is it the kidney? Is there a nerve involved there? So there's just a lot of different details, but it's really fascinating because you might have low back pain, kind of like I had, and nobody could figure out what it was, but you also might have been constipated your entire life and just thought that was normal life, and then you went to go do a deadlift and threw out your back. So there's just so many different layers. I work with a lot of postpartum, and I would say before Carol jumps in, one thing that is really powerful in the world of trauma is our body responds the same way to physical trauma as it does emotional trauma. So the deeper layer of this, let's think of like an episiotomy. So we have this scar after a woman has a baby and there's a little bit of tearing. There's the physical trauma of that tearing, but there's also what was that woman emotionally going through that wound also stored. So as we're working through releasing all these lines of tension, it is releasing the physical tension, but how can we support that woman through the emotional release? Is it bringing on other providers to also address that, or is the manual release also going to release that emotional piece? So it's really fun work. Yeah. You want Carol to jump in? Yeah.
Does anyone want to ask any questions?
I won't ask a question, but I do work with Dr. Missy, and it's just crazy some of the stuff that she's done, where she's like, I'm releasing your gallbladder, like some of these just crazy things that I didn't know that I needed. And the other day, she was talking about the compression of like my bladder to, I think, like my duodenum or something like that. And every
Good
time
memory.
what's that?
Good memory.
Yeah. Every time that I leave, I certainly feel better, and yeah, it's just amazing the work that she does. It is very gentle work, so it's almost feels like she's not doing much. You can feel movement happening, and you can feel all of the things that she's saying she's doing actually happening. Every time I leave, I certainly feel better. I am a back pain sufferer. I've had back pain in the past. Been an athlete my whole life, so definitely just wanted to vouch for her because I think she's the bomb. And I send my clients to her. I'm a personal trainer as well, so comfortable sending my clients there. And yeah, definitely a resource that I'll use for a long time.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I always say to Dr. Missy that she laughs because she's like, I've never heard anyone say this, but I'm like, oh, I can feel juices flowing. And she's like, or it could be blood flow. But you can in real time feel the release when she, I guess, releases the organ or unwinds it. Like, for me, I had a lot of gut issues, and I could feel, like, as she unwound some of my intestine, basically the flow go right through me. So
I'm glad you said that. Juices. It was like the funniest moment and amazing. So instead of this like chiropractic manipulation just from the name of the work, my hands, what all they're doing is creating space. So these layers of trauma, physical, emotional trauma, have limited space, maybe compressed the organ, maybe tugged it in multiple areas. So all I'm there to do is help the body create space and then allow the body to do its amazing healing on its own. So a lot of that juice sensation is blood flow nutrients to the area, and then just retraining the organs how to move on their own again. So, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
not sure how we're gonna. I think I might use you like. Okay.
I can do that.
Did you already get the desserts or? Thank you.
Do you want me to pass those out to you?
Sure.
So hi, I'm Carol Oliveira with Rebel Healing, and I work with a number of energy devices, but what I'm speaking about today is ISIS microcurrent neurofeedback. And Jen's passing out a paper that says the conditions that are known, it's known to help, and it is the most life-changing, transformative treatment that I've ever worked with. I got into treating alternatively. My daughter got very, very sick in 2008, had to move home with her dad and me for 5 years. Not what you want to do when you're 25, 26 years old. And so that led me into the world of energy medicine and eventually led me to ISIS microcurrent neurofeedback. We are all in agreement about trauma in the body, and a dysregulated nervous system gets dysregulated most quickly from trauma. We groove these neuropathways in the brain, and the quickest grooving of a neuropathway will be trauma. And then the whole system is impacted by it. So what we do, and I'm going to give you a demonstration with Jen today, is I attach electrodes onto the head, send a tiny little electrical signal. It's 3/trillionths of a watt. When I told my brother that, he's like, can we measure that? Because it's very tiny. But it has profound impact. So we believe it's doing a number of things. One, it's nudging the brain to create new neural pathways. So those are going to be like fresh. They're not going to be dysregulated. You have a stimulus, it's going to travel down that neural pathway and have a healthy outcome, versus a pathway that has been set by trauma. Have a stimulus, you end up with the same outcome, whether it's insomnia, pain, depression, anxiety. Everybody's different. So we're nudging the brain to create new neural pathways. Also, as we send the treatment, it's like a soft reboot of the brain. So it's like that neural pathway will be unorganized, it'll disorganize itself, and then reorganize itself towards a healthy pattern. So every time the signal is sent, it moves to a healthy state. It also brings on all those neurotransmitters back in their right proportion, because they can get out of proportion, and it helps to restore the correct proportion of the neurotransmitters. So it's doing a lot of things. It's very non-invasive, and most people begin to feel better right away. I have lots of stories about people getting better. So we're just going to do a little, I think, yeah. We've never done it out here on the patio before, but okay. Take off those glasses. So we just, all of this prep work is about getting a good connection with the electrodes. And so we just do a little cleaning with, I use Everclear just to cut the skin oils.
Note that multiple times when I've left her treatments, she's left this pins in my hair, and I've walked out looking ace.
We do have lots of different
It happened. I had a clip like this. I was like, what?
Yeah, I've lost lots of clips that way. So just cleaning.
Why don't you talk about what clients come to you for?
So clients come for as many reasons as you can imagine. And I had a little 4-year-old severely autistic boy come. And after his first session with me, he started giggling and laughing. His parents had never heard him giggle or laugh.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, they love me. But I had a young man, he was 25, couldn't work. His anxiety was just, he was housebound. His mom was paying all his bills. He wanted to get a job as a night security guard, so he never had to deal with people. And by the time he was done, he got a restaurant job at a very busy restaurant in Cherry Creek North, and he got their first Employee of the Month award. So he went from really completely dysfunctional to having a life again. I see lots of anxiety, depression, ADD. I've had a lot of teenagers come who are just having so much trouble getting it from their lessons. And then when I see them afterwards, they're doing the accelerated courses. Let's see, what else is on here? Oh, memory. We see lots of improvement in memory. One of the biggest things that happens for people is improvement in sleep. And I think sleep issues are like an epidemic with not just our country, but I think all over the world. People are having sleep issues, which compound health issues because we need sleep for that restorative time for the body. It also, when we're sleeping, then the lymph system in the brain is also able to detox, which when we're not getting good sleep, it's not, and that's causing issues for people. Let's see. Oh, I had a number of people with epilepsy come and then not have seizures again, which is amazing for them. I've had a number of stroke victims. One had a very, very, very serious ski accident, and she requires full-time care now. But she was, drooling, and her drooling got significantly better. She could keep up in conversations and actually chime in because she still had a group of friends. She was actually able to chime in and talk when they had their monthly lunches. So the effects are just all over the place. I have a little 4-year-old. She started with me when she was 3, and she was the terror of the family. She ran the family. So angry. She was 3. And now she's calmed down. She's settled down. Her older sister told me, like, she comes and snuggles with her now. Like, that would never have happened before.
So the cards, let me know.
So just so many, just do these points. Yeah. So many positive changes for people. Yeah. Anybody have any questions?
Anybody have any questions while she's just getting? Yeah.
Yeah. So do you always, how do you determine where the patch goes, or is it always the same?
So 1 second. So we just had a question say, how does Carol determine where the patch is, or is it always the same?
Okay, great question. So we have some favorite site pair that typically work really well, but there are a lot of site pair to choose from. And if these don't do it, then I would move and do others. Yeah.
And how long is the treatment? Or do you have to go back for several treatments?
Yes.
So what's the protocol?
So they build, the treatments definitely build.
The question was, how many treatments and how long is a typical protocol, and how long is an individual treatment?
So the first session will be longer because I take a history and I figure out where I'm going to start and all that. After that, the sessions are about a half an hour. And, I've had some people clear up all their issues in 5 or 7. Typically, to really have that enduring sustainability where you just feel like you never need another session is in the 20-some sessions. Yeah.
You go like every week?
Yes. For more involved cases, I like to start with twice a week and then back off to once a week. And then, we extend out from there. Every 3 weeks, every 4 weeks, till you just don't need a session.
My son has some social anxiety, so
Oh, it's perfect. Yes.
that would take about 20 treatments or something.
Not always. Sometimes. How old is he?
17.
Yeah. I mean, typically, people feel better when they stand up.
Okay.
Now, that's going to, because your nervous system is finding its new normal, its new healthy. And so it takes, because you'll feel the benefits and then you'll feel it coming back to how you've been. And then each session that kind of goes longer, where you're feeling better longer. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else? Any questions? Yeah.
So initially it would start with like a brain map, is that right? And then
This doesn't require any brain
it doesn't
mapping.
require a brain map.
No, it's
There
one
was
of the benefits that we don't require any brain mapping.
Okay.
Yeah.
There was a question in regards to brain mapping, and Carol has said that it doesn't require any brain mapping.
I have a question.
Yes.
Right now, so I often think that the exponential proliferation of EMFs in our society, which have never existed in human history,
Yes.
is responsible for the insomnia epidemic that you mentioned.
Yes.
Largely, well, other factors too. But,
Lots of factors.
but
Yes.
could this sort of override that or neutralize the effects of all that radiation that we're all getting now?
She's going to ask the question, right?
Yeah. So there was a question in regards to the large amounts of EMF radiation right now, and if this treatment could help counteract some of the impacts from the EMF
Especially with insomnia.
radiation, especially with insomnia.
So I'm going to answer that with I don't know about that. I think we have to do our darndest to remediate the EMF exposure. And there are companies that are actually coming out with devices that have clinical trials saying how they do reduce the EMF exposure in the vicinity of the device. And clinical trials say that they're reducing it like 74%. That's huge. Depolarizing that magnetic field. So I think that's going to be the future. I used to think that 5G would just go away because people would be getting sick and they would take it down, and I've gotten over that now. I think we're going to have to find ways to protect ourselves.
I was wondering if there were any like possible like negative outcomes or side effects of it.
That's a great question. Oh, she'll ask. She'll repeat that.
There is a question to ask if there was any negative side effects from the neurofeedback.
So I've started the program.
Just make sure you're speaking into
And
it too.
speak into the camera. I can produce what I call a wobble. That would be an overstimulation of the nervous system. So that typically expresses as feeling tired, wired, nauseous, dizzy, get a headache, or an exacerbation of a symptom. So if somebody has anxiety, their anxiety might go through the roof. Always temporary, never permanent. We don't even look at it as a bad thing except that it's uncomfortable, but we know the nervous system is responding. If someone goes through treatment, never feels anything, we're going to have to really up the ante with a stronger program because the nervous system is just totally not responding. But when someone feels something, the nervous system is responding. And I work really hard to not wobble people because it can be uncomfortable. A wobble can be as short as a few seconds. I had someone in a chair, I just turned on the program, she's like, my anxiety. So we just turned everything off. We talked for about 5 minutes. We went on the program and she did really, really well at the time. I wobbled my own daughter because I just done the training. I was in San Diego with her and treated her every day after the training, and she was light sensitive, which is one of the things that we look for. If you came to see me, I would ask you certain questions to see how dysregulated and how stuck your nervous system is. And her she had super light sensitivity for about a week. So I really try not to wobble people. So we try to really start gently and let the nervous system have a little exposure before we do anything more.
So it is running right now, just
Yes.
as FYI.
Yes.
Are you wobbling?
No, it doesn't. It really doesn't feel. The first few sessions, I felt incredibly exhausted afterwards. Like the first session, I was so tired. Like driving home, I was just really, really exhausted and fatigued. And then I probably took a nap because at that point in time, I was also dealing with some thyroid stuff, and so I was napping quite a bit. But I probably took a nap and I felt fine. And the second session, I felt pretty fatigued, and then that passed afterwards.
Now
So
she just feels better.
yeah, I just feel better.
So this is how it goes. I would The actual running time of the program is right around 10 minutes. It takes sometimes more time to hook up than it does to run the program. And I guess maybe I've covered it. Any other questions? Anybody have any questions? Yes.
What's the output on your computer?
So this is an EEG. It's a graph of the brainwave.
It's asking what the output on this computer is, and because you can see like a little bit of a graphic.
Is that monitoring her brain?
So yeah, we're reading the EEG from the electrodes. There's also a portion, the green portion down here is just muscular, but the red up here is the brain waves.
Says she's really smart. That's how I read it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Shall we?
So that's how a treatment goes. So I would finish, take off the electrodes, clean up the sites, and that'd be it. Yeah. All right. I'm gonna finish.
Yeah, that's fine. Dr. Mark, I'm going to move this over. Sorry, Zoom, guys, we're going to just have this kind of come over a little bit so he can be in the line of presence.
Yes. She's transitioning. So when you're reading the brainwave, you adapt the treatment protocol in the middle while you're watching.
Typically, I most would go by what she's feeling. Yeah, because I can adjust if she's like, oh, I'm starting to get a little vague. I can make adjustments.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, over to you.
All right. Anybody need to go to the bathroom? Thank you so much. I really appreciate being here and being with these two wonderful women, three wonderful women. And my name is Dr. Mark Armbruster. I do Denver Vitality Center in Lakewood, and I also have a space in Nurture. If you guys ever been there, it's an amazing place. So I'm a third-generation chiropractor. So I was brought up with the thought of the body can heal itself. And I learned traditional chiropractic care, but it wasn't, I noticed when I would adjust someone, like I'd adjust my brother, and an hour later, the same bone was out. I was like, oh, what's going on? Why is that? And then I started to realize, I did a lot of research, is that you got to start to look at the brain. The brain is like what controls everything, right? But then not only that, but also look at the body, because we think that the patterns can store in the brain, but they also store in our posture. So I spoke to a lot of friends, neuropsychologists, and they just say that working with someone, sometimes the brain is so tricky, and they have this saying like, a patient, like their session's over and they'll grab the doorknob and they'll drop a bomb on you. Oh, I was suicidal the other day, or my husband and I are going to get a divorce, And so the brain is very, very tricky. So what I've learned when I work with patients is that why not? Why not meaning it's like the body can heal itself. So what can we do to get it to stimulate, to get it to start to heal? And so when I focus, my main focus on patients isn't to get to someone to feel better. I don't focus on getting them to feel better. I focus on getting them to better feel, because we are so numbed out. And a lot of us, like, if we've sat for so many, years, or we'll like sit in our garden for 4 hours and we get back up and we're stiff and sore. But normally after sitting for 20 minutes, you'll start to feel stiff and sore. You should get up and move. But sometimes we overdo it and we start to numb out and we check out. We can even have an injury. Let's say we have a shoulder injury and it doesn't heal and it goes on for a year. We start to associate it like it's not even part of my body. Like, oh, I have a shoulder injury.
Yes.
And what happens is that part of the body has its own blood pressure regulation. It has its own, and it creates what's called a sequestrum, which is like scar tissue around this area, and it separates from who we are. And so what I work with is the big picture is like getting someone to change. Because if we just treat the symptom and don't go with okay, what are the factors that created that, then they're going to do the same thing, or the pain will move to some other part of the body. So it's all about getting the brain to find old trauma and to become aware of it, and it just starts to melt. It's very, very similar to what these do. These women do. But I look at the posture, look at the body, I look at what's called the meningeal system. You've heard of meningitis, that's an infection in that tissue. It attaches to your sacrum, the base of the neck, tailbone. So a lot of my contacts, and they're so gentle, it's like the amount of pressure you like touch your eye. So light. But that's all I need to do is to get the brain to become aware of, whoa, that place is checked out. As soon as the brain becomes aware, the breath opens up and the patient starts to sink into the table. Because my job is to get someone out of a sympathetic dominant, the fight or flight pattern, because you can't heal. You can run away from a tiger or a bear in that pattern, but we've got so used to being so busy and stressed. My dad practiced for like 50 years in Denver, and he said, you know, the adjustments aren't staying in place as much as they used to do in the 50s. And one reason is because we're so overly stimulated. Because back in the 50s, we'd get a phone call about something. They would send a letter in response. Here, email, fax, immediate, and we got to respond. So our brain is starting to do all these different multifunction. And the thing when you like, some people are really proud of multitasking. The problem is that you're not going to do the effectiveness if you focused your attention on that one job. You start to water down everything. So the same thing with the nervous system. When you have, they've done studies on this type of chiropractic, and after the study, they found out that the brain functions 3,000% better. And they were blown away because they were used to 25%. But what happens is that when I start to work on a patient, there's one question I ask everyone is that, are you okay with change? Because some people said, what do you mean change? And I go, change is going to happen. Because what I do, I throw like a monkey wrench into your system. Because who you are is not who you think you are. Because we were like trained by our parents, we were trained by society, or a big trauma affected how we do things in life. So what I'm interested in getting that trauma to heal so you can connect and like, what do I want to do in my life? My parents are like accountants and I want to be a dancer, and I stopped being a dancer so I could be an accountant, but they were miserable. So it's so funny, like when I work on patients, I never know what to expect. And I'll work on someone and they'll get off the table and go, oh, you didn't do anything. I go, just wait. They'll call me back and go, I've been crying for 2 hours. Can you make it stop? Because the reason why I say, are you okay about healing? But some people do not want change. They may say they want change, but when they start to change, that means everything starts to come up, and because it needs to reorganize. It's like, you ever seen those sand sculptures that do like layered sand? Okay. So we're walking around with the layered sand based on how our parents raised us, society, when we got embarrassed in school, someone pantsed us in front of our classmates and all that. We got so afraid and so upset that it's like putting another layer of sand in, but it's not our sand. So what we do with the adjustments, it's like stirring up the sand and letting it settle based on what's inside you, your ways of doing things. And the only way to do that is help the brain, because the brain has to be involved. However, we don't like get the mind involved because the mind is so bloody clever. So I was like working on a patient, and he was 45. I practiced 18 years in Los Angeles, California, Santa Monica, and then 10 years in South Africa. Very stressful places, right after apartheid ended. And I was working on this patient. He was a 45-year-old accountant. He still lived at home and never dated in his life. And I was working on him, and all of a sudden he started moving and making these sounds on the table. And I go, this is not this guy. I mean, this is so not him. And after the adjustment, I go, what happened? He goes, you're not going to believe it. I go, what happened? And he says, I re-experienced my birth. I said, no, you did not. He goes, I did. I saw the doctor. I saw everything. He says, do you see the scar on my face? I said, yeah. And he goes, that was from the forceps when I was born. And it's still, that scar still stayed there. So the crazy thing was, I think a month later, he moved out of his parents' house, and 2 months later, he had his first girlfriend. And so what I look at is that when you have birth trauma and it's so bad, you want to be close to your mom. And he had that unresolved trauma. As soon as his body dumped it, his life started to reorganize. And that's the whole thing of the style of work that we all do. It's reorganizational healing. It's not just about healing, about getting rid of something. It's to reorganize based on who you are and what are your qualities, what do you like to do. And that's why it's really fun to work on people. Oh, I think this kablooed. When we work on people, should I?
Don't mind pausing for 1 second. We might move you just a little bit here and see if it's a better connection. I'm sorry, guys.
Are there any questions while
I'm sorry,
we're waiting
Zoom.
for this? I'm looking forward for the summer, and it's like, okay, we're done with the winter, God.
Yeah.
So sorry.
It's okay.
Okay. Go back up.
Okay.
You might have to scoot over there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for noticing that.
Yeah. So reorganizational healing is like what we do. It's not just saying, oh, let's get you out of, let's just get the back pain to go away. It's like an example of trauma, kind of like what you mentioned. You could be climbing on the tree and your mom said, don't climb on the tree. And you're up on the tree and you want to get this apple. And all of a sudden you hear a crack and you start to get alarmed. And all of a sudden the branch breaks. When it's falling, all you think about is your mom's going to spank you or really piss you off. And then you have the pain of falling and breaking your arm. That sends a neurologic pattern in the system. It's so powerful that it starts to reprogram. And so you start to do things different than what you feel like doing. So healing is about neuroplasticity. It's getting the connections out of the middle brain, the limbic system, which is emotions. Most people feed off their emotional state. They'll do something from an emotional thing. The question about the microwaves and everything is like, what we do is we try to help you become more adaptable. Adaptable means that you respond to the present moment based on the present moment, not based on, oh, because a red truck hit you, and so every time you see a red truck, you tense up and you can't drive. So it's like adapting to the present moment, and that's what we say, do you like change? Because your life will definitely start to change. And people say, well, what if it changes into what I don't like? That's impossible, because it's inside of you. It's like we all have this essence of our qualities and what we're good at, and a lot of times what I've noticed, our gifts are hidden by the opposite. If someone's really loving, they're like the most angriest, pissed off person on the planet, because it's a protective mechanism. They could have been like let's say their ability was dancing and they loved to dance, but when they were 3 years old, they danced in front of the television set during the Super Bowl, and her uncle hit her really hard, and then she had that trauma. So she learns, when I do my gift, I get injured. So healing is about uncovering the layers gently. That's why I work very light and because I don't want to bring something up that the body's not ready to handle. And the body has this amazing healing system that knows what order. Sometimes toxins release. I've worked on patients like their nose will drain for a couple days. Back in the 80s or 90s, I worked on someone, the cocaine was so big, I had these patients, they're like drooling out of their mouth after adjustments because they were releasing the cocaine and the toxins from that. So that's why I say it's like healing is like, true healing is like falling off a log. It's naturally supposed to happen. When it doesn't, something's interfering, and sometimes it's like too much stuff happens at once, and the body freezes, and then we numb out. And if we numb out, we can't feel that part of our body anymore. The adjustments kind of like throw things off. I've had patients after an adjustment. This one woman came up to the front desk and she says, I'm going to ask you, she had her checkbook out too, because I'm going to ask you a silly question. And my receptionist said, what? She goes, what's my name? She was so like, letting go of something. There's this period of like when you're on a trapeze and you're going back and forth, and then you let go of the trapeze, and then as you turn, you're praying that the other bar is going to be there. That's what happens sometimes when you go into deep healing. You go in these periods of like, I don't know who I am anymore. It's because you're letting go of a strong ego structure on how you had to behave or how you had to be safe and protected as a kid. So healing is about reorganizing and learning what's right for me.
Can you explain, like, when you say adjustment, is it very similar to how a traditional chiropractor
No.
works?
No. What I do is that I adjust you based on how your body is. I read your body. I look at your posture. So if you have headaches, I don't go to the neck and adjust your neck. And the adjustments are very, very light, gentle contact, just like that. And then I let the body rest. Because if your body releases it, because if I was to massage you and I released the tension, I did it. But if your body does it, it's permanent. Because what we want is that we want to get to this heavy trauma under here, but there's like 300 layers above it. I don't go directly try to say, okay, let's talk about your mom. It's like, no, it's like all this stuff up here, this is ready to let go. Once that releases, then this comes up, then this comes up. And eventually when this comes up, the charge is off of it, and you'll release it in your sleep, or you'll have something cathartic happen, and it's not so traumatic because it's like the onion layer, like that. So because I evaluate the body, and based on how the body is, that's how I work on someone. I look at phases. There's certain phases of trauma that the body goes through. Some are fear-based, some are victim-based, some are who I am, identity stuff. And it's kind of interesting because when I work on people and they have like a big shift in the lower back, the hips, that has a lot to do with identity, they come back and they go, I'm mad at you. And I go, why? It goes, because my favorite chair is not my favorite chair anymore. Or they'll say, I'm going to divorce my husband. I go, wait a minute, not yet. Give it 3 months. Let's see what happens, because it's about reorganization, and it's about you, because sitting in that chair was hurting you, and you become aware of it. I had a patient, she had back pain, wasn't getting better. And eventually she came back. I go, and she says, oh, my back pain's better. She goes, what'd you do? I sold my Porsche. I go, what? Yeah, I got a Toyota because I noticed every time I got in the Porsche, my back would go out. But I'd have to be a psychic to say, oh, it's your Porsche. So she learned and found that out herself. Another story, I'll be really quick because I know I'm running along. This patient I was working on, he started to have headaches. And I was adjusting him, the headaches weren't going away. It kept coming back. And he was like a strict vegetarian. In fact, he was the president of the Vegetarian Society. And so he came back one day, and we were like working on him, like trying to get it to shift for 2 months. And he came back and he said, my headaches are gone. I go, what happened? He goes, I ate a Burger King Whopper. I said, what? I ate a Whopper. And I said, tell me. And he goes, well, I went climbing with my buddy, and the only place that was open was Burger King. And he said, the funny thing was, 2 months ago, I had that feeling of eating a Whopper, and I never did. So he says, but the interesting thing, in the middle of me eating that Whopper, I remember what my dad told me about being a man, because his dad died 2 years later. So that Whopper and the memory of what his dad said were in the same part of his brain. So that's what we tell patients, that go with what's inside you, because that's the miracle of healing. It just happens. And it's crazy on a weekly basis, I hear these amazing stories about the healing. And it's not about me, it's about what I can do to turn the power back on, step back and say, okay, let's see what happens.
Just to really quickly add, because I've been a patient of his and we share a bunch of patients. So after an adjustment, it's actually during an adjustment, it's almost this, I'll either feel like an unwinding in the body. So it feels like you just had the best massage, but it was just like a moment. And then if I don't feel that much of a shift in my body during a session, I will feel a typical chiropractic adjustment as I'm moving throughout my day after. So the self-adjustment that he's talking about eventually will happen because of that unwinding. And so it's just really powerful stuff. And I remember after my first adjustment, I'm from LA, so I can be very triggered by like traffic. It's just like in my DNA. And I remember driving home, and this person cut me off, and it would be something that would create this sympathetic response in my body. And I was like, oh, it's fine. So it's just like layers of that shifting in your body. And like he said, you have to be open to the change, otherwise you'll completely miss it. So
yeah. And it's and a lot of it is about getting you to trust in yourself. And the bottom line is like self-love. Because how many times we could have been picked on when we were kids, or our parents were a certain way, and we've learned this protective mechanism to protect ourselves. We may be too aggressive or too kind or whatever. So it's like saying, okay, it doesn't matter. Let's just very gently undo the layers and let you self-discover. Because it's like you could write a self-help book about yourself from what you experience from it. And I'm not using my educated mind to determine what to do next, because I read your body, and your body, the signs that it gives me, okay, that's where I make the contact. And that's why we get the results, because as soon as the brain finds out, I want to teach you how to self-adjust, so you don't need me. It's like you teach someone how to fish, they can feed themselves, right? So that's what we're doing, very gently, getting your body to do it for itself. So, any questions?
Do you all have cards?
Yes.
Just repeat the question.
Oh.
I have them, but of course I didn't bring them.
All of my info's on that paper.
I've got cards.
There's a question in regards to do the practitioners have cards, and we can send out the contact details of everyone as well through the Eventbrite.
Any other? Yes.
It's kind of for all three of you because it's like every one of your things speak to me. I had really bad postpartum. I had 2 children within 14 months or 16 months.
Wow.
But I had emergency C-section with both, and so it was recovered from surgery. Literally had my organs out on a table, put back inside of me. You know, brain things, mom, brain, body, and so it's like which or all do I need? All of them. I'm feeling like much better now. You know, my daughter's like almost a year and a half, but still, like, I know there's things within me that need to be worked on, right? And like need help. And so yeah, like, what do you need? All three? Is there like one that I should start with? Like,
You know, I guess the best question is like, where do you feel resonating to? I like, which three of us like, yes, that's the, because it's like when we kind of surrender and kind of feel, because we always have like our parents' voice in our background, right? I remember the first time I went to college up at CU, I went to the grocery store and I was so excited because I was going to buy food. And when I came back, I bought the exact same food my mom bought. It was like Cheerios. Like, no, I want a Captain Crunch, but I got Cheerios. So it's like within you, it's like, where do you feel the sense of?
I'm opposite of my parents.
Good.
I definitely felt when she started organs, I'm like,
Yeah.
hey, mine were like on the table.
I know that.
Twice in
I
less than a
felt
year
the
and a half,
same.
like,
I felt the same
I
thing.
don't know. I feel like my organs probably need some figuring out.
Yeah, when I heard that.
Yeah.
I work with women along the whole motherhood spectrum, helping with fertility during pregnancy, postpartum. I usually try to recommend at least one organ checkup postpartum just to see how your body responded, especially C-section. And your body could be really good, and it will all come down to my hands and what my hands feel. And usually the thing with the C-section, outside of the organs coming out and going back in, is we only see the tip of the iceberg with the scar.
Yeah.
So there were so many different layers cut through, and what traumas were maybe stacked on top of that before going into it. So that's my motherhood spiel.
So, and I will say, just one of the things about the organ manipulation is that what I really liked about going to see Dr. Missy for myself was that I was really convinced that I had a physical problem. I mean, I was feeling something physically from it, but she was scanning me and feeling that it was, she kept saying, I mean, I'll be really honest with you. I actually thought that I had like a tumor or cancer or something like that, to the point where she went ahead and referred me to an ultrasound so that we could investigate in there. But she kept saying to me, I'm scanning it as energetic. It was emotional. It was emotional. And she would work on my system, and I just would feel the release in the moment. And the funny thing about us is that she won't let me come see her every week. And it's a joke. She's like, no. She's like, I don't need to see you for another 3 weeks. And I'm like, what? Can I come? Can I come?
I'll bring you a coffee.
And she's like, you're fine. I can feel this release. We'll see how stuff shifts back. So it's been really good as well, because I haven't felt like, it hasn't been exhausting to my schedule really. We've made movement in a very short amount of time. We've had, there's been a number of things, but one of the things was digestion. I'm a pretty open book. I had very loose stools, like constantly. And she did some work, and after the first session, that has changed, which I've done parasite testing. I've done, every kind of just everything, and it wasn't working. So it's pretty remarkable.
And sometimes it's not that the work that patient has put in wasn't working. It's just this is sometimes the last thing, because people don't necessarily think of needing a manual manipulation of that area. So.
Well, it also, I'm going to be honest, and we joke about this, is it sounded too ethereal for me, right? Because I was like, I have a pain, I have some digestion problems, I need to supplement it out, or I need, my functional MD or whatever. Like, I felt like it needed some kind of like other kind of manipulation, more aggressive
Yeah,
traditional manipulation.
And that's one thing that we all have in common. It is so gentle and non-invasive.
Totally.
The less you do to the body, because I've worked with her, I do jujitsu, and so my back gets trashed, and so I really affected my hip, and she kind of worked on me, and afterwards I had the largest bowel movement ever because she was working on that part of the body. But then also she found like lines in the shoulder, and so it's not just about, it's not about the abdomen. It's just like the whole body kind of.
Totally.
Yeah. And so that was really cool. So all of us do because the microcurrent is so minimal, but that's where the most powerful healing takes place, with the subtle stuff. Because when you do more aggressive, the body has to respond, and then it can shut down because we're used to that. But something like, I'll make a contact, the brain goes, that's nothing, but we go the back door. And all of a sudden they have this, like, patients are laying on the table, and they'll have this memory of when they were 4 years old. And they go, I totally forgot about my dog when I was 4. But that was that trauma. Then when that starts to let go, and all of a sudden, whoa, my shoulder's better and all that. So it's like, if we go too aggressive, we just relax and we say, oh, they're going to work on me. It's almost like dropping your clothes off at the dry cleaners and saying, okay, clean this, and they walk out and it's done. But it's not. Healing is like us. It's like we want to turn your system on so you guys can heal yourself, because you're the true healer. We just more like turn the power back on. Like when I heard like organs on but that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were like to my husband, like, you want to know your wife literally inside out? Like,
Oh.
here are her organs.
I know. The comedy of
Bondage.
surgeons are like, they have to. Yeah. So that's one thing about the subtle energies, because it's more of an energetic thing. It's like you could be up in your room and listening to loud music, and then you wanted this girl to ask you out, or not ask you out, but to go on this date, and then she's at your house and she's knocking on the door really hard, and you can't hear it because you have the music really loud. But then she's, there's the doorknob, and she's very gentle. She's like, look at the force and the loud when you pound, but you press the ringer, and all of a sudden he can hear it. It's the same thing with energy. The brain goes, whoa, I didn't know I was stressed. I didn't know these organs. It's like, what is the liver doing way up there, dude? You should be next to the kidney. And all of a sudden it starts to go back in the system. And function comes back. And when you function better, life gets better. Because it's about changing the vibration inside you. So that's the whole thing about, it's just not about feeling better. It's about better feeling. The energy that you put out, you're going to start to get different energy back. If you got a lot of anger in you, what you repress, you express. So you get a lot of angry people coming into your life. As soon as you start to let go of it, they go, wow, I'm attracting different people. My friends used to be my friends aren't my friends anymore because I don't relate with them anymore.
I'm just going to ask, does anyone on Zoom have any questions? I'm very conscious of your ability to interactively participate. Okay, no. Any other questions here?
Have you guys seen any like shifts in blood work, or like have you worked with people who have like Jen mentioned thyroid, like things?
Yeah.
Like panels
I had a patient.
There's a question in regards to if the practitioners have seen any shifts in blood work after patients have been to see them.
Yeah, I had a patient last week. She came in and she was all happy, and I go, what's going on? She goes, I went to my rheumatologist and I don't have RA anymore. HLA-B27 and all these other factors weren't there. And she goes, plus I can move my arms, I'm all really healthy. So that's part of the picture, but I feel what we do is a fantastic start because it's so subtle. It's like, especially when you're dealing with kids that it's hard for me to run around and to adjust them. Sometimes it's easier to have them sit there and you put the probes on and get the thing. because there's so many ways to get the healing.
Have you had any shifts in blood work, or do you know any patients?
I don't know of any, yeah, that have actually done it.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't want to do that. Yeah. I wanted to say one thing too about your scar. Missy referred to the scar of many layers.
Mama Care.
Oh, and I just wanted to say specifically to you, one of the devices that I have, we actually so a scar is like it's a block for the energy flowing through your body. So one of the devices I have, we can restore how the energy can flow back through that area again. So whatever you do, you might want to add that. It's just like a one-time thing. I had a client, she's about my age, and when she was in her 20s, she had a farming accident. She had this rope-like scar around her arm, and we treated, and it still hurt her. 40 years later, it still hurt her. And we treated it, and it became soft and supple, and the pain came out of it. And we've seen other scars that just disappear, like surgical appendectomy scars will just go away because we've restored the flow of the energy through that part of the body.
Mine actually too. I asked my doctor because it was like two very quickly. They reopened it for the second pregnancy, and it was numb. The whole area around it healed well, and wow, it looks great. But the skin, I would touch it around, it was numb for so long, and I was like, something's wrong. This isn't right. And she just said, I don't know, I've never heard of that. And I'm super like in touch with my body.
Come
so I was like, there's
on.
something
Yeah.
wrong. And
Yeah,
she
when you
goes,
go
"No,
that
it's great,
deep,
it's fine."
yeah. When you go that deep and you cut through all the layers, the brain says, "Whoa, where'd my friend go? We were connected, now we're not."
Right.
Just to add to the blood work too, a lot of the patients that I work with, there's usually like a nutritionist on the team, a functional medicine doctor, and I always tell patients like change is going to happen. I can't necessarily attribute it just to what we're doing because they're doing all this other stuff, but there's usually like thyroid, lots of like liver function. We've seen those changes. I don't know if you've done blood work since we've worked together.
Yeah,
but-
I mean, we're still on the blood work question. I mean, my blood work has changed, but I'm also have other factors in there. So I think it's like maybe a combination of components. But for me specifically with, these two modalities that I've experienced, this has been more around like a very, very intense leg, hip, and lower back and kind of upper rib pain that I thought for a long time was from an automobile accident. I don't know where or what that comes from. And what I have learned through the work with Carol and Missy is that trauma can store in your body for years
Since
and
birth.
Since birth,
even in utero.
and not have any manifestation for years. So I started with leg pain. It came up to my hip. It went into my pelvis. It's gone up here, and I was having some digestive issues as well. And those have been, really. I mean, the digestive that I almost am scared to say it's solved because it was something that I just lived with for so long and didn't necessarily. I think Mark mentioned this. Like you just start to live with these things and you accept that this is the way it is. Like. As you were talking about your scar, I'm like, oh, I have a scar from my ACL that's still numb. I didn't even think that was abnormal. You know what I mean? Like, you just start to live with it. And then with Carol and the ISIS treatment, I don't necessarily attribute blood work to that, but who knows? Maybe, I don't know.
Absolutely.
But it was much more about, for me, a sense of peace with things and trauma that I've experienced and the ability to because, again, it's tied into some of these thyroid issues, but just kind of just more calm and having more energy. And that could be a combination of the treatment plus regulating the thyroid more. But I think it's all tied together, right?
Yeah.
So, question.
Yeah. Does any of you guys have any success with severe scoliosis?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
The question was in regards to any success with severe scoliosis.
How old?
70.
Oh, 70.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. when people get over the age, I saw this funny T-shirt from when I visited my mom in her care living facility, and it said "Gravity sucks." And the thing is as you get older, because of gravity, things start to settle. However, I mean, I've had really great results with young kids, like a 13-year-old girl who pretty bad scoliosis. We retook the X-rays, and it was, even the orthopedic surgeon said, "I've never seen this before." However, scoliosis can be created by many different factors. Sometimes it's emotional. Emotion's always in there. They did a study that after a physical trauma, 3 weeks after the trauma, the emotional trauma is greater than the physical trauma because how it changed your life. Like you can't do your sport anymore, you can't do whatever, or you have a hard time sleeping because of the pain. So the emotional factor with someone that old is like when you start to clear it, it's amazing things can happen. I had, I think he was like 62 years old, and he was a Korean vet, and he was so racist on how he communicated about people. But then I started working on him, and his son was coming in, Carrie, and his son said, "I don't know what you're doing with my dad, but keep doing it." I go, "Why?" Because he's the biggest pack rat I've ever seen. And he showed me a picture of their house, and there was a hallway about that big that all this stuff was. So his dad cleared it within like 4 months. His dad cleared, and he wasn't that anymore. And also the way he spoke was different. But his posture was really off, and it was really slumped forward, and all of a sudden that started to change. So it's like we never know what's buried inside. And that's the beauty of it. Your body does. And it's about timing. Timing's everything in healing. It's like you wouldn't go up to your fiancée when she's going to the bathroom and say, "Will you marry me?" No. Timing, it's the patient's timing. It's like we may do an adjustment, and then 3 days later they'll be in the shower and they reach for something, get this loud pop in their neck, and the bone went back in place, and their arm pain went away. So, and I know from what we've experienced when we work with patients, like, we just hear amazing stories of how it happened on their time, not my time. Not like saying, "Oh, I need to get rid of the headaches right now." Sometimes the headaches are there for a reason. I had a patient who had severe migraines, and I told her, I said, "Try not to take your medication. Do your best to hold off." And she came in one day and she says, "Oh my God, I had the worst headache of my life, and I didn't take the medication. And then I heard this pop, and I felt this rush in my head." And then she had this memory of getting hit on the head when she was like 8 years old with a golf club. But what happened is that in order to heal, the body was building up the cerebral spinal fluid pressure to push through the scar tissue. And every time she'd get the headache, she'd take the pain medication, and it would lower the pressure. So it never flew. And finally, she sat with it, and it finally burst, and then the headaches were gone. So that's the cool thing about the human body. It's just amazing. That's why we don't do the healing. You guys do.
I think an interesting thing to add with the scoliosis too is I'll see patients who just have the curve. Maybe it was from when they were a child, something like that. And then I also see patients with a rod to fix the scoliosis. And so when the rod was placed, depending on how long they didn't have the rod and how long their body was starting to adjust, what was happening to the organ system under there, what was shifting. Maybe there's tension on their lungs and they can't breathe as well. Maybe their liver is being compressed. And so that's really cool work, because I'm not obviously going to make any change in the rod, but how can we help the organs get used to have more space to be able to function in that new position that they might have been tugged along with the rod. I had this patient who, she was coming in, she was on oxygen during the day, and it was really just a social problem for her. She used to only need it at night. And so at first I was working on her lungs, but she had scoliosis in her sacrum lower spine. And once we were able to, I didn't fix her scoliosis, but what I did was I helped her rectum and her, she had a hysterectomy, but her bladder be able to adjust to that new space. And it was almost like this decompression on her lungs, and she could breathe better, and she got off her oxygen during the day. So it just kind of comes down to letting the organs have space wherever the spine is, and then see what the body does. It's pretty cool.
Shift happens. When
It's
shift hits the fan.
so cool.
You just feel this like flow, like through the juice. You feel it. And she says to me, COVID's been really, because you might want to, depending on what she's working on, like, I'm like, oh no, there might be some gas coming. And she's like, well, COVID's great because we have masks now. But yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah. How early would you, like you talked about the trauma in like even in utero, but when I was born, like how early, my son's 2.5.
Immediately.
To me, he had a lot of trauma.
Yeah, immediately. Yeah, because my daughter was born 3 months premature. So I worked on her, and it's very gentle contacts, because it's like what I tell parents, it's like, let's clear the pattern now, or when they're 30, they'll be on a psychologist talking about the pattern. The sooner the better. Because we develop defense mechanisms, ego structure, and all that
We just think,
in order to cope.
Clingy, that's what they do.
No. Yeah, I mean, just like that 45-year-old accountant still lived with his mom. Yeah. That's great. That's so good. I love it. That's not.
Anyone else? Anyone on Zoom? Any questions? Thank you guys so much.
Thanks for hanging out.
Thank you for so much interaction and questions.
I have some cards.
We'll be sure.